Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. A self-described prince of the provinces. There are few politicians like Shane Jones. He's the Minister of Oceans and Fisheries, Regional Development and Resources, and has been in the spotlight recently for spearheading a restart and expansion of oil and gas in New Zealand. Over the years, he's faced criticism for his close relationships with industry leaders over the environment. Comments like, "Goodbye, Freddie," when talking about if an endangered frog stood in the way of mining construction probably doesn't help. Today on The Front Page, Shane Jones is with us to take us through his latest push for oil and gas, changes to oceans and fisheries, and whether New Zealand's power crisis is fixable. First off, when it comes to oil and gas, remind me why we're repealing the ban in the first place.
So the oil and gas industry is a contributor to the energy mix of New Zealand. In the absence of gas or coal, our electricity system doesn't work. We have the option of importing gas, but then that worsens our vulnerability, although we may be forced to do it. Everyone wants to race to achieve renewable 100% electricity, but in the transitional period, we need fossil fuels. And I'm a politician who believes we should use our own resources before we import other people's resources. The $200 million set aside as a part of the package beyond the oil and gas ban is to both accelerate what we know is already here and hopefully to de-risk in the future in the event that foreign firms or domestic investors want to have another go and open up new gas fields. So it's really an attempt on my part, on behalf of the government, to buttress our security.
Will there ever be a day, give it, say 5, 10, 20 years' time, when we will be 100% renewable, do you think?
The challenge is that the best renewable option for us is more hydro or more geothermal. The difficulty with solar and wind, which people are investing in, is that you have to overinvest because of the unreliable nature of the weather. So let's say you build a solar farm for 100 megawatts, figuratively speaking, you can really only rely on it to give you 40 or 50% of that 100 megawatts. So then you have to build 200 megawatts so that over the lifetime and the cycle of the weather, you can get up to 100%, and just no one is ever going to put in that additional investment. So us Kiwis, historically, what we've done when it hasn't rained, we've drawn on the natural gas, which has declined. I think it's fair to say that the decrease is both a matter of politics as well as Mother Nature. Look, I've made an art form about blaming Jacinda, but a lot of that is just because I'm a politician. But the real danger of Jacinda's oil and gas ban decision was it chilled investment. It pretty much sent a signal to New Zealand businesses and overseas investors there's no future in New Zealand for this type of fuel to power the economy because the government wants to ban it. And there are so many other places overseas for foreigners to put their capital in and use gas. And that's what they did.
So you don't think that we'll ever move 100% away from oil and gas?
I'm 65. It won't happen in my lifetime.
In terms of geothermal energy, though, you've promised that we'll double production by 2040 at the same time as promising to restart the oil and gas industry. Is that a bit of a contradiction there? Are you just making sure that we've got fingers in all of the pots?
My mission is to create the most competitive priced energy in the OECD. I want New Zealand to have the most affordable energy in our comparable trading partner jurisdictions. So that's what I'm on about. And for that to happen, we need to boost and shoot every arrow in the quiver. Now, geothermal may prove to be a game changer in a fundamental way if we can commercialize what's called deep-seated supercritical energy, which is down at about 5 kilometers in the earth. And the international experts have advised me, along with their own officials, if anyone can do it, the Kiwis can do it. It is a bit of a moonbeam shot, however, such as the critical importance of energy. I think that the community should expect the government is willing to put capital at risk and take on some of these long-term punts. And without a doubt, geothermal supercritical energy is one of them.
Scarcity is rewarded in terms of high prices and sort of high profits for gentailers. And one of the things we've observed in the market is that the price of electricity has been decoupled from the cost of actually producing it. So the cost of electricity, the forward prices of electricity are currently well above the long run cost of building new power stations, and have been since 2019. And that's a good sign that the market isn't delivering the sort of outcomes that you'd expect from a competitive market.
In terms of gentailers in this country, you mentioned power prices for Kiwis. Does there need to be a reform into how gentailers work?
Gentailers exist for net profit after tax. They're commercial profit-seeking entities. They don't believe it's their role to deliver either affordable energy or energy security. And that's the trade-off that we all entered into once John Key sold them to the share market. The position that I've always advocated is there needs to be more transparency and separation within the gentailers. Their level of power rivals the Australian-owned banks. And look, I've got quite a professional relationship with them. They know if I ever have my chance, I'm going to visit Utu on them on behalf of New Zealanders who are experiencing energy hardship and energy poverty. But at the moment, I don't have enough votes and I don't have the authority to do that. It's a devilishly complex area, this electricity area. We have an organisation called the Electricity Authority. I dismiss them as the chocolate teapot, although I've started to moderate my views. And they are looking at different options as to what might be some smarter ways to regulate the energy sector and the gentailers to improve competition. So we have more private sector investors. We have a diverse range of people creating energy, maybe closer to where the energy is actually consumed. And one thing that I'm looking at is the allocation of over $100 million into some of the lines companies in Northland, where we've got arguably the best solar and some of the best wind generating capacity. But the transmission pipe, the garden hose going to Auckland, is literally a garden hose. It's not capable of transporting new sources of energy at volume.
If we move on, you're also Oceans and Fisheries Minister, of course, so you need to be protecting the oceans, but also advocating for fisheries. But that must be quite difficult, hey, because if you do something that benefits the oceans, the fisheries would presumably get pissed off, and then obviously vice versa, as we've seen. How does that all work? Should they be separated, those portfolios, do you think?
Well, I don't remember there being an oceans portfolio. I think it was an innovation that came in with Labour. But I'm guided by what we campaigned on. I'm guided by our manifesto. And we said that we were going to generate more jobs, more investment and revenue from a legacy industry called the commercial sea fishing industry. It's quite a complex area, as you rightly point out, because lots of litigation takes place. I mean, the litigiousness in this sector is akin to someone with a very drunken habit. It just seems to roll on, which is why I only want to see in the future responsible litigation, not vexatious, frivolous or reckless litigation. And that's why we're changing the law to restrict the ability of people to litigate against the fisheries decisions unless it's tightly defined and relevant to a fisheries decision, not saving every ecosystem, not saving the broad, trying to pile onto fisheries the responsibility for the broad health of the ocean around New Zealand.
I mean, they're the ones out there though, right?
Well, the men and women who eke out an existence often in the big vessels going away for 6 weeks at a time. They literally are taking their lives into the cup of their hand. All you need to do is watch those images of men and women going over the Greymouth Bar and off the west coast of the South Island to Taipotini. There is a very lucrative fishery. It's a dangerous wildlife industry. I had some experience in the fishing sector when I was a younger man, advocating for it. In some respects, the lessons I learned in the fishing industry have made me the politician who I am today.
So you've announced reforms, obviously, to the Fisheries Act. You mentioned it's the most significant for decades. What else have you done to support fisheries lately?
Well, I've broadened my attention to both seafood farming and fisheries. Most of the seafood protein comes from fisheries and related resources that are farmed. It's a relatively small percentage that comes from wild caught fishery, but New Zealand has one of the most enviable fisheries systems in the world, their quota management system. So look, what I've sought to do since I've been the minister is bring some overdue change, the largest changes since 1986, on the question of mussel farming and oyster farming. I extended all the permits by and large till 2050. So people don't need to go and get any more permits. They can just put the money into the business and get on with running their business. I've initiated a body of work with Mr. David Seymour, my senior colleague. He's the deregulatory minister. And we want to identify what rules and regulations need to change so we can farm trout and other freshwater species, because we need to create new industries. We need to create new jobs. We need to build new exports. And that's not going to happen unless we take risks. So it's quite a busy dance card. On the downside, I need to be very careful that I explain to the New Zealand public, in particular the recreational fisheries sector, that these changes are not going to hobble their rights or their privileges.
And in terms of this portfolio, Shane, what have you done to protect our oceans while you've been in charge?
Well, that's been addressed mostly by the Foreign Affairs and Winston Peters. He attended the Oceans Conference. I mean, obviously, New Zealand First has supported Honourable Tama Potaka with his introduction of some reserves around the Hauraki Gulf. I've closed down some fisheries whilst I've been the minister, such as crayfish. I'm about to go out and consult in closing down the harvesting of crayfish off the entirety of the coast of Northland. Given that I come from Northland and I was born and bred on Kaimwana, you might imagine it's going to be quite a stiff experience. But that's a small example which shows that I don't shy away from making some of these decisions which will be to the benefit of our fishery resource and the community over the long term.
What about bottom trawling? Why can't we just say no to that?
Oh, well, that's because David Attenborough's documentary was a gross misrepresentation of what happens in New Zealand. And then all these sort of kind of social media critics and warriors mistakenly thought that our fishing industry is ruining our ecosystems by bottom trawling. The images on that documentary are not from New Zealand. And look, bottom trawling is a very skillful set of operations, and it's easily catastrophized, but New Zealand doesn't actually apply bottom trawling to much of our economic zone. There's just some targeted areas, and a lot of the seamounts deeply located in the ocean, they're already protected. It is a key feature of how the industry operates at the moment. And with the advent and the expansion of cameras, I'm sure over time people's fears will be allayed. But it is an area, you're right, that is easily weaponized and exaggerated. But then I often find that the green mania drives people to catastrophize the 1 or 3 events that happen in the fishing industry, which may be egregious, but they're not reflective of the behavior or the experience of the entire sector.
If it is done so little though, does the benefit of just saying, yes, we're going to ban it outweigh the economic benefit of bottom trawling, say?
Yeah, well, I know that there is an agenda to ban it in New Zealand. I know that a number of people have been agitating to ban it in the Hauraki Gulf. That will not be happening for as long as I'm the fisheries minister.
Why not?
Because once you ban one part of an activity in a certain area of the coastline, the fishing activity just moves to another area. And the bottom trawling references, which is not exclusively, but it pertains to the orange roughy fishery, and obviously the orange roughy fishery has been very low in the past, and quota dropped off substantially in order for it to recover. That's how the system works, and we're going to have to look at those options going forward, because there is an issue, obviously, where the scientists and the officials in the industry are concerned about the state of part of the orange roughy fishery in the South Island. But you can't blame bottom trawling for that.
Well, we'll have to wait and see when it comes to actually the devil being in the details here. But the idea of sustainability and Shane Jones is like fossil fuels and climate action. The two do not mix. And I think New Zealanders need to understand why this has been so controversial for so long, because ultimately our fishing industry is not run in a sustainable way, and Shane Jones wants to take the shackles off and see more of our oceans exploited.
You've been accused of being out of touch and favouring private or corporate interests while downplaying environmental concerns in favour of economic development. You must get sick of that, Shane. Why do you think it's such a bugbear, and why do you think that you're accused of it so often?
I just think it's the blood sport of politics. I think there's a new generation coming forward who've forgotten that milk comes from cows. That fish is a wildlife industry. I just accept it for the political mix. It's got more ubiquitous with social media. But for every person that's complaining, I can tell you there's 10 other Kiwis who applaud and barrack me for being one of the plain, candid, articulate men in politics who says it as it is. And it's like I said, I know that triggers responses. But then that's what politics is about. And I say to all my critics, meet me at the ballot box.
So you're not a puppet for private interests?
I'm a great supporter and promoter for investment, for jobs, for economic growth. And I say to the viewers, who are many, and listeners to your program, we are going through some severe economic challenges. We have to become familiar and comfortable with making trade-offs. And because our society has become so metropolitanized, far too many of my critics have forgotten that the wildlife industries, the farming industry, the growing industry, they represent the bulk of our export earnings. And New Zealand will never be self-sufficient unless it can use its natural resources, boost its income internationally, because to the best of my ability, I've sought to convince my critics living in Auckland, you don't grow rich by doing each other's laundry.
And Shane, lastly, what does the future look like for you? Are you already thinking about campaign, for election 2026? Is now all go, or do you get to wait a few months till next year?
Well, obviously, I've got my constitutional responsibilities as a cabinet minister, and most of those decisions, not all, are made under the law, so I can be held legally accountable for a number of my fisheries decisions and the expansion of mining. As you know, New Zealand is now regarded, as a consequence of the Fraser Institute analysis of mining destinations, New Zealand has gone from last to number 15 in the whole world in terms of a desirable investment destination for mining. But that's what I was asked to do by the Prime Minister. That's what I was asked to do by our government. And I'm going to continue to expand the footprint of jobs, investment. I got no time for that duo perched 250 meters up in the sky on top of a coal mine down in the West Coast. I think that their beliefs have turned into a statement of personal arrogance and conceit, and now they're endangering all those jobs in that coal mine. And I just think that it's reckless and it's as indefensible that their personal luxury beliefs are now regarded as of such importance that it would wipe out hundreds of jobs on the West Coast.
You can see where they're coming from, though. I mean, when we do talk about oil and gas and coal burning, etc., then you've got a planet that's heating. You've got kids worried about their future due to climate change. We're getting, bigger, scarier storms. We had a tsunami warning the other week. I mean, so you do understand people's concerns when we talk about oil and gas and everything. I mean, do you think that there's a toss-up to be had between saying, look, we need this in order to have energy and be able to turn the lights on in the future, but here we do concede and say, look, we are looking at other options?
I think often I get a bad rap. I'm the politician that spent over $200 million dedicated to protecting our stop banks to stop rivers from flooding. And I've been told by various regional councils, if that money hadn't been allocated and spent by my good self, areas such as Taradale would have been wiped out. I'm the guy at a time of fiscal hardship dedicated $60-odd million to exploring for supercritical energy, and if we can pull it off, it'll completely invert the price equation of New Zealand's energy. Also the guy funding at the moment small communities from Stewart Island, Chatham Islands, the East Cape, Northland, community renewable energy projects. But it's easier to focus on Shane Jones as someone who backs fossil fuels that's going to fry the planet. And look, you can't fight that level of emotional virtue signaling with facts. And that's what brings me out with my own brand of hyperbole and rhetoric and all those Luddites that met their match in Matua Shane.
Thanks for joining us, Shane.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is produced by Ethan Sills and Richard Martin, who is also our editor. I'm Chelsea Daniels. Subscribe to The Front Page on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and tune in tomorrow for another look behind the headlines.